All right, time to talk some USC football with the Trojans getting started in week one against a tough Fresno State bunch out of the Mountain West Conference. We've got Alicia De Artola on the line from Reign of Troy. Alicia, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. We got a little taste of football last weekend, but everybody dives into play this weekend. And of course, it's Labor Day weekend, so we get Thursday football all the way through Monday night. But USC and Fresno State go at it at the Coliseum on Saturday. We talked to you maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. So do you feel any differently about this football team having gone through fall camp, whether that be for the better or for the worse?
I think I'm stuck in neutral. I think that there are the same things that there were to like about spring camp are still there. They're not as fresh, so maybe they're a little bit more not quite sure how positive they are. I wish that I had been able to come out of fall camp and said that JT Daniels is the quarterback, super confident about that. USC is going to be fine at that position. Fall camp was slightly lackluster when it came to the quarterbacks. Not that they were bad, but none of them were super impressive, and so I'm a little bit more wary of them. But that's the kind of thing where you really aren't going to know what JT and this offense are going to be able to do until the season starts. So that's what's exciting about the season starting is all of those little questions and the back and forths and the am I being optimistic or pessimistic? It all goes back to, well, we're going to find out on Saturday what they actually look like in live play.
So, Alicia, if we put it all together, and correct me if I'm wrong, the secondary is a bit thin, but in terms of standouts and certainly wide receiver are strengths. Maybe the line play not so much on either side of the ball, or where do we stand in the trenches?
Well, wide receiver is definitely the strength of the team, and defensive line could be the strength of the defense. They weren't particularly great last year, but they were breaking in quite a few redshirt freshmen, guys who were playing their first season as starters, and they've transitioned this offseason to a bigger defensive front that is designed to maybe play the run a little bit better, which was one of their weaknesses. And there are reasons to think that these guys that were in their first year as starters can take that next step in year two on that defensive front. They returned just about everybody, so that's positive. And you sort of, if you want to think about being a year older, being a year more experienced, being a year of different coaching, having a different strength and conditioning program that is really focused on, eating, making weight, being strong, all of those kinds of things, that I think you can look at the defensive line and say, with a certain amount of certainty, that they will be better than last year. It's just how much better than last year, because they have the capability. All of the guys on that line were big time recruits that USC brought in. You're even adding a new recruit, Drake Jackson, who is getting compared to Leonard Williams at this stage, to Rasheem Green at this stage. So if that all comes to fruition, then the defensive line will actually be arguably the strength of the defense. But they do have to take that step forward, where the secondary is just a whole big question mark. Lots of guys that you feel really good about, but there is zero depth there and zero certainty, because you really haven't seen any of them play for extended periods of time, because injuries, because red shirts, because all of those reasons.
We're catching up on USC football with Alicia De Artola. We encourage you to head over to Reign of Troy to check out her work and the rest of the staff on the Trojans. And since I've kind of set the tone in just throwing everything out there and not going in any particular order and just hitting you with anything, I guess I'll also set the tone with the offense, trying to set a tone that's going to be much different than what we've seen in the past. So when I think air raid, I think a number of things. I think that can speak to the amount of passing in terms of run-pass ratio. That speaks to the spacing on the field of having 4 and 5 wide receiver sets, no tight end, no fullback, etc. That also speaks to tempo in terms of trying to speed up the game and get in a lot of plays. So how much of that are we going to see versus maybe not necessarily the crazy air raids that we see traditionally at Houston, Texas Tech, Washington State, because they still have some running backs, and championship teams got to run the ball.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this air raid is you could almost call it a faux air raid. I think that Graham Harrell has taken a lot of air raid concepts and built them into his Graham Harrell offense, which does want to run the ball. At North Texas, they were more or less balanced in terms of using their running backs, not just out of the backfield, but running the ball with those running backs. And even Clay Helton, when you ask him about this offense, he kind of shies away from like the air raid tag, because this won't be what you see from Mike Leach. They will throw the ball if the defense asks them to throw the ball. If the defense stacks the box, then they're not going to run into the box. So a lot of it will be dependent on just the triggers that are built into this offense to get the most out of what defense that they're facing. They're going to go to the receiver that's open. They're going to run the ball when the numbers advantage is there. And when it comes to personnel groupings, that's the other really interesting thing is in spring and fall camp. Yeah, we've seen 4 wide receiver sets, but they haven't been exclusively 4 or 5 wide receiver sets. The tight end has almost always been on the field. We've seen formations with 2 running backs. We've seen a lot of different personnel groupings. And so I think that this offense is going to have a lot of variety that will resemble air raid concepts. Certainly when it comes to spacing, like you said, the kind of routes, the spacing, the concepts are going to be there. But this isn't going to be an offense that looks unfamiliar from a pre-snap situation, because you're going to see the tight end. Now, you might see the tight end split out more often because you have someone like Josh Follow, who is a receiving tight end weapon. You're going to have running backs on the field. You're not going to see empty backfield very often. So things will look very similar. The hope is that the concepts that they're then running, where they're going with the ball, when they're going with the ball, the pace that they're moving the ball will be slightly different. And that's, again, what we're going to find out more of in against Fresno State in the season opener is how much all of those things are going to change, because there's only so much you can tell in practice. So much of practice is scripted. So much of practice is we're doing this thing on this day and this thing on this day. So even people who've been watching practice all off season are a little bit in the dark as to how this is actually going to function.
Now, Alicia, between Malapai and Carr, how do you see that time being split and the amount of carries?
That is the big question. I think Vavai Malapai is the number 1 running back. Just the conversations that I've had with Mike Jinks, USC's new running backs coach, he loves Vavai Malapai. And Vi has been injured in fall camp, dealing with a little knee sprain. So we haven't seen a ton of him, but I think he will be the first guy that's out there. And if you look at North Texas's numbers last year, they had a featured back. The featured back in that offense was getting 16, 17 carries a game. When you look at Mike Jinks, the running backs coach, in his past stints coaching the air raid with Cliff Kingsbury, and in his past things, he has preferred a featured back, 18, 19 carries for a running back, or touches, I guess, in this offense, because you will see them receiving passes out of the backfield. So I am inclined to think that you'll see someone like Vavai Malapai get 15 touches, 15 runs, and then Stephen Carr will clean up with, I don't know, let's be super generous and say they're going to run a reasonable amount against Fresno State. That might not actually happen, but let's say Stephen Carr gets, 8 or 9 and a couple catches out of the backfield, and Marquise Stepp gets 4 or 5 and maybe a touch out of the backfield. So if you're looking at it and you want to say that USC is going to have 40 running back touches in this game, that might happen. It might be less. Then Vavai Malapai, I think, will probably get the bulk of those.